I just finished watching episode 7 of The Wheel of Time, season 1, and I'm here to give you my reactions to the episode, discuss what we saw, completely book spoiler free. So you are free to enjoy this as long as you've watched episode 7 of The Wheel of Time. And right out of the gate, big news. Big news here. Rand is the dragon? Seems to think he is. Oh boy. From what I think we can gather here, there is a scene at the beginning of the episode where what appears to be an Aielman from episode 3, as Tom described to Matt, is fighting. She appears to be pregnant as she fights off like a horde of dudes, which was really cool. I really loved this scene. I am not the biggest fan of action all of the time. It's just kind of boring to me. So I'm just waiting for the action to end most of the time. Mostly because it's just hard to follow. This was not hard to follow. I felt like I was able to track her movements and understand how she was able to just demolish these soldiers in such a brutal way. It was great. I really, really enjoyed this. Then she finally has to just start giving birth when Tam, Rand's father, comes across her and helps her give birth. But then she dies, and we learn that Tam takes the baby and brings the baby to the two rivers to raise it. And we even get a flashback from Rand when he's bringing Tam back to the village after they were attacked by the Trolloc. Tam tells Rand about this experience of finding the baby. So all of this seems to imply that clearly there's some shenanigans going on with Rand's origin. Was born at the base of Dragon Mount, and of course, the other big thing here, he can channel. It was pretty obvious that he had some kind of super strength going on when he broke that door, but not only did he do that, but he was also the one who protected Egwene in the ways. It wasn't Egwene that channeled against the Trolloc, it was Rand. And we're going to see him just nail some arrow shots, just to, I guess, to prove to himself that, like, yes, this is happening. And even more interesting to me is that he knew. He's known from the start. And he hasn't said anything. He's known that he could channel, or at least I'm sure he found that out fairly quickly. He knew about Tam and the fact that he wasn't his father. He's known these things. He's known that one of them is the dragon. He's probably strongly suspected that he's the dragon, but he hasn't said anything, and you can understand why. He's not only in denial to himself, but there's also a lot of danger. The last person who declared themselves the dragon, not doing too well right now. Remember last episode, the guy that was begging to die? Yeah, that guy was the last guy who said he was the dragon. It really does add a lot of context to the scene we had with Tom and Rand in episode 4, though, where Tom is explaining that he thinks Matt can channel and talking about the danger of it, that his nephew was not able to prevent its call, essentially, was gentled by the Aes Sedai and eventually killed himself after being gentled. Pretty easy to understand why Rand might have been a little hesitant to be forthcoming with this information. But not only that, there's also the other thing going on here, which is that men who channel go mad from the corruption of the one power. That's not great. That's not great. It's informing so much about Rand's character, who up until this moment was not super developed in the show. We knew him as somebody who wanted to do right, who was very protective of his friend, and who felt left behind by the woman that he loved, and who just wanted to have a family. Just wanted to settle down. I mean, in episode 1, he talked about just wanting to build his own house, just live a chill life. Instead, here he is. So every relationship that Rand has is informed by this. The protectiveness of Matt and his situation makes a lot of sense in the context of Rand knowing this is what could happen to me. What looks like jealousy to us in Rand and Egwene, I think can be explained through the lens of Rand feeling like he is the dragon. Remember, when Egwene told Rand initially that she was going to leave him to be a wisdom, he was pretty chill about it. He was sad, but he understood and he didn't hold her back in any way. But once he found out that one of them is the dragon and that it might be him based on his parentage, things changed. And you see that when Moiraine goes to Egwene in the cave in episode 2, he seems to have an adverse reaction to it. I think at first glance, this appears to be Rand just being jealous, not wanting Egwene to leave them to fulfill this greater destiny that she seems to want to have for herself. But in reality, I think it's something a little bit more complicated. And he talks about it here in episode 7. He says, I was scared. I'm still scared. All this talk about Egwene leaving him, I don't think it's been about Egwene or leaving him. I think it's been about him feeling like he's going to have to leave them and not wanting to. And Egwene is the representation of that. As she has this desire and as she is pulled away by Moiraine, she is representing the inner turmoil that he is feeling, that he can't escape from, that he's trying to deny is in himself. And he lashes out at it. He's trying to deny it in himself, but he can't even admit it to himself. So the only thing to fight is Egwene. But ultimately, at the end of this episode, we see that he's accepted what he believes to be his fate, which is that he needs to leave them to fulfill his destiny, to protect them. I loved this. I think it's such a great use of character. And I love the way it recontextualizes everything that Rand has been through in the entire season. It's really well done. I also have to say that I love Yosha Stradowski's performance of Rand, not only in this episode, but in the way that he's been able to play a character that knows more than we do. One of the biggest clues for me that Rand already knew he could channel was Yosha's performance in that conversation with Tom. I think there may have been some viewers that have seen Rand as bland up to this point, but Yosha has essentially been playing a character that is trying to play a role, who is desperately clinging to the life he thought he had and the person he thought he was. And I do think that if you look closely at his performance in the first 6 episodes, you can see the cracks. And that, I think, is brilliant.
You do the same for me?
You bet.
But let's rewind. Let's talk about some of the other characters. We came off of a huge episode for Moiraine, and we're now seeing some of the payoff from that episode already. When they're in the ways and the evil whispery wind shows up, it whispers into her ear the guilt that I talked about in the previous video. She does feel it. She feels it for these kids that she's condemning to death, and she also feels it for Lan. We talked about that too. She masked the bond with him. Why? Why is she leaving Lan behind? I'm sure he would be valuable there, but she doesn't want him to be put in danger for her mission either. This guilt is catching up to Moiraine. And this is fascinating because there's still such a juxtaposition of this guilt and this ruthlessness that she must accomplish her goals. She leaves Mat behind, not because of what they said, that he'd be safer there, but because she says, look, if it's him, screw this guy. He's gonna ruin us. And so she leaves him behind. Not only that, but she secretly sends the Red Aja after him. I don't think things are going to be very fun for Mat. We know what the Red Aja will do to him if he is a channeler. And Moiraine deems it necessary to neutralize him as a threat. She has cast judgment on this man. And these conflicting aspects of Moiraine are battling inside of her. And the result is she leaves Lan behind. Speaking of Lan, we find out a lot more about him as well. You know, I talked about last episode being a very character-focused episode. This was a massively character-focused episode, even though the plot also advanced quite a bit. It just wasn't focused on one person. It was focused on advancing pretty much all of the characters' arcs, except for maybe we'll talk about Perrin. But we find out a lot about Lan. We find out that he is a king of a fallen land. So not really a king, but could be a king. This is fantasy. Everybody gets to be a king. So Lan's family was killed. He was smuggled away to a foreign land and raised by people that weren't his family. He tells Moiraine that before he met her, he had nothing to live for and nothing to die for. And she gave him both. This is obviously very telling, and it's very reminiscent of the story Steppen told. All of a sudden now you can see that Lan and Moiraine seem to be on opposite paths. Moiraine had a life that was ripped away by her sense of duty to this mission. She is sacrificing everything to accomplish this goal. Lan is somebody that had nothing, and he latched on to this mission and this sense of duty because it gave him purpose. But now, as Moiraine has sacrificed everything, she's finding herself in a spot where she has very little left to give, and everything is about the mission, while Lan is slowly developing his own life, his own sense of purpose outside of the mission. And she sees that, and she sees the opposite trajectories that they're going on, and she wants him to succeed in his while she sacrifices hers. This new sense of purpose, of course, being Nynaeve, who is going to make another attempt at tracking Lan, and this time not quite as successfully, but it ends up with a dinner invite, which is nice. And they basically go on a date here. I mean, there's been tension building, and they're finally ready to explore this. For Nynaeve, there's a lot of conflict here. You can see it when they hesitate before finally entering the room. It's another thing that was touched on in episode 4. She feels like Lan belongs to Moiraine, even though they don't seem to have that kind of relationship. It's still something that is so deeply intimate. How do you reconcile the idea that somebody that you're going to be intimate with is sharing part of that experience, let alone the long-term ramifications? She's gonna have to share this man with somebody she doesn't really like very much, somebody that is quite manipulative and has her own agenda that Nynaeve wants nothing to do with. And Lan, as we talked about, is dedicated to this mission and Moiraine and everything it represents. So how are they supposed to make this work? Nynaeve sees this, but she can't help herself. There's something here. And hey, she might be about to die. Egwene, ever the A student, is the first person to say, look, we have to press forward with or without Mat. She says, look, we have to go to the eye of the world, whether or not it means our death. We have to try. Nynaeve told us in episode 5, Egwene is made of steel. She wants to be something greater than she is. She wants to be a part of something, but not because of a selfish sense of ambition or desire for power. She's always looked up to Nynaeve, who is a protector, and she's always wanted to do right by the people that she cares about. In some ways, her arc is echoing Moraine's. Her conflict has been that she feels that she has to sacrifice her relationship with Rand in order to accomplish these greater things. But by the end of the episode, she comes to the realization that she's not willing to do that because she doesn't break. She's gonna have both. She's gonna have Rand as her warder, and she's gonna go off and she's gonna save the world, and everything's gonna be great. Except that's not how it's gonna go. Rand is off to the eye of the world, and it's looking like he's the one that's important. So I'm curious to see from Egwene how she handles this. She's already having to deal with the fact that Nynaeve is clearly stronger than her in the power, and now Rand, the one that was supposed to be left behind, the one that wanted nothing to do with any of this, he's now the one. And this will be a real test of Egwene's character. Will she be able to swallow that ambition that she had and watch as the people around her do these great things, and she, for now, seems to just be support. Then there's Perrin. Perrin can see in the dark, which is cool. But also, the wind tells him, you wanted your wife dead because you have feelings for another woman. This has kind of been hinted at in the previous episodes. We definitely saw that there was some awkwardness between him and his wife in the first episode. This shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. There's not a whole lot of additional analysis I can put on top of this, though. Obviously, he just feels even more extra guilty for what he did because he also had these feelings. My biggest problem with this is in the execution of the argument that happens. It starts with them discussing whether or not they should go with Moiraine to the Eye of the World, but quickly devolves as Rand gets upset with Egwene for dismissing Mat and brings up the fact that she left again. This is still fine for me. Given the fact that Rand feels like he is the dragon in this moment, what he's doing here makes a lot of sense. Perrin, on the other hand, felt a lot less motivated to me. I just can't buy that in the midst of them discussing a suicide mission, after all of the trauma that Perrin has experienced, that this is gonna be his gut reaction to a spat between Rand and Egwene. Accidentally killing your wife is enough trauma. What do we need a love triangle for? Give me a break. Are you serious? This was the worst part of the entire series so far to me. The fact that they've gone through all of this ridiculously dangerous nonsense. They just came through a black void where a wind came, there was a Trolloc, there's a dude in the lightning. It's ridiculous. It's scary. It's traumatizing. And the thing that they're arguing about is who's got feelings for who back in the Two Rivers? And to me, it just came off as just such petty drama that I am not here for. Luckily, it does feel like it resolved somewhat quickly by the end of this episode, and genuinely, I hope we just leave it behind. I'm sure Perrin has plenty of conflict to his character that I guarantee is going to be a lot more interesting than this. There's plenty of other things to talk about in this episode, but for me, again, I care about the characters. I care about their paths, their journeys, their arcs, their conflicts. So those were the most interesting bits to me. We also get some foretellings. We get Taran Fane. What is he up to? We enter a very cool fortress. That whole scene in the ways was awesome and terrifying, and I loved the flashback to Rand using the power instead of Egwene. And then at the end of the episode, they enter the Blight. Just a lot of cool things happening in this episode. I loved it. Just ditch this love triangle nonsense, and I'm so all in. Thank you so much for watching this again. I was overwhelmed with the response for the last video. You all have been so supportive, and I'm really appreciative. So I definitely want to keep doing these. I may also make some videos for the book readers to talk about some of these other things that have to do with the books. I'll also be back on post-show recaps for the book club podcast if you want to hear more detailed thoughts from me from a book reader perspective. And there's lots of other things I want to talk about on here. Again, I read a lot of fantasy. I'm actually currently reading Gardens of the Moon in the Malazan series, finally getting around to that. I also just finally received some signed copies of the Farseer trilogy that I would love to talk about. That's my favorite series, The Realm of the Elderlings. I have so much to say on it, so I would love to talk about that at some point. And The Witcher is coming up. There's so much great stuff in fantasy right now. I'm really excited about all of it. And I'm excited about this channel, and I'm excited about doing all the things. Thank you again for all of the support, all of the nice comments. You've all been so good about not spoiling anything in the comments and being so nice. So thanks again. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. It will help me know that you do want more and that you'll watch these things. And also like the video so that my self-esteem feels okay. Thanks again.